Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're in chapter 36 of our Old Testament studies, chapter 36 of Exodus. 40 chapters and we'll be finished. 36 is going to be brief. Uh, the chapter's not that brief. There are 38 verses, but we're going to do about 7 here. And then if you want to study the other ones in between on your own, or a deep study, or if you're going to build a tabernacle, they're very important because it's about the minute details of how to attach it all together, and the assembly instructions, if you would, are here for building the tabernacle. How to hook it together, where this curtain goes, where that curtain goes, where the badger skins go. Everything is really important. But I'm just going to bring out a couple of things here. It's interesting in this chapter, and we'll let you want to study the middle of it yourself if you want. Chapter 36, we've been building this tabernacle, and we're continuing to do so. We went through all the plans for chapters and chapters. Now they're actually assembling the structure. And the guy in charge is found in verse 1. His name's Bezaleel. Remember, he was the overseer of everything. Moses picked him out. God had him picked out, and Moses acknowledged it, and so he's in charge. Moses didn't do everything. Remember, everything's about organization, and no one person can do everything themselves. It has to be somebody's got this gift, somebody's got that gift, and you bring it all together. So, then wrought Bezaleel and his helper Aholiab, and every wise-hearted man, that's the skilled craftsman, in whom the Lord had put wisdom and understanding to know how to work all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary, according to all that the Lord had commanded. These people already had these skills. See, now they're bringing them together for this project. And Moses called Bezaleel and Aholiab, and every wise-hearted man in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom, and everyone whose heart stirred him up to come. And that's how the Lord gets a hold of us. See, He puts it in your heart that, hey, I need to be part of this. The Lord had put it in their heart that they could help out in some way. And that ought to be about everything we do, about even going to church. The Lord puts it in their heart that, hey, I need to be there. I'm going to be there. So whose heart stirred him up to come to work to do it. Verse 3, and they received of Moses. Now remember, like anything else, anything you do, any project you do at home or anything else, it takes money, right? So they received of Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of the sanctuary, to make it withal. And they brought yet, I highlighted the word yet, mind, they brought everything, and now they're still bringing more offerings, free offerings, every morning. And the wise men that wrought all the work of the sanctuary came every man from his work which they made, and they spoke to Moses. Now here's a problem that you're going to find in the church never again in the Bible, and probably never again in history. It's a very unique problem, and I don't know of it ever happening again. They spake to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded to make. And Moses gave commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman make any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from beginning. You ever been part of a church where the preacher had to say, stop bringing so much? No, but this one time it did. The people were so excited about the work of God that they were bringing more than enough, and they didn't know what to do with it. For the stuff they had was sufficient for all the work to make it, and it was too much. So God put it in their heart, and then like, whoa, slow down. It's interesting how you follow these people through the Bible. God's ready to wipe them out at one point, and then they get right with God again. Now their heart's right with God. But that's the way it is all through the wanderings of the children of Israel. They're like a roller coaster ride. You'll find out, and that hasn't changed. Human nature hasn't changed. Societies haven't changed. It'll be like they'll get right with God, and they'll be up on the top part of the roller coaster, and they'll be so blessed with God that they'll forget about God, and then God has to do something to put them down on their knees again, and then they'll be back up. And that's history, the history of the church and the history of human beings. It's like we're that way in America here now. We're so blessed that it's easy to forget about where your blessings are coming from. But eventually, God allows something to happen that gets your attention turned back to God and off of yourself and all your things and everywhere again. All right, we're going to stop there in chapter 36, 7, and we're going to skip all this middle. That's the part, if you want to read it and study it later, it's about how to assemble everything, how to connect everything together, where this curtain goes and that curtain. And let's just go right to the end of it here, chapter 37. We don't want to skip over this verse at all. Something in that verse that jumped out at me. It's they're making the curtains, they're called hangings here in the King James. Verse 37. They made a hanging for the tabernacle door. There was what they called the door of the tabernacle was nothing but curtains hanging down. And to go into the tabernacle, you had to go behind the drapery or the curtain, the door. And remember, Jesus said, I'm the door. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And the tabernacle's teaching us something about God. How does man approach God? Well, you approach him through the sacrifices. And then in that Holy of Holies, beyond the second curtain back there, remember only once a year the high priest went, and they could only go in there themselves because of the blood of the sacrifice being sprinkled, and then they could approach God. We can only approach God because the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ, died. He shed his blood for us, and therefore we can approach God. But Jesus in John chapter 10, he said, I'm the door. No man cometh unto the Father but by me, John 14. So if anybody's going to enter in to approach God, you got to go through the door of Jesus Christ. So the door of the tabernacle, as you're approaching God, was a curtain that was made out of blue and purple and scarlet. Those have always been interesting colors to me because when we read the New Testament, we find that Jesus was called the man who was wearing the purple robe. In another place, that robe the soldiers put on, they said it was a scarlet robe, depending on which gospel you read. Was it purple or was it scarlet? I tend to think there's some of both. So one writer called it purple, one called it scarlet. I also tend to think, and I don't have any Bible for this part, that it may have had a little bit of blue on it too, because the way you approached God through the tabernacle is you went through the door, which meant you had to go through that purple and blue and scarlet door to come to the Lord. There's no way to approach God today, I guarantee you that, except through the door of Jesus Christ. Maybe symbolized in these hangings back then. A lot of stuff in the tabernacle was symbolizing Jesus. All the tabernacle offerings and the sacrifices and all these things were pointing to Christ. The door, the purple, scarlet, blue covered door. And there was fine twined linen of needlework. And the pillars on their hooks and their overlaid chapters and fillets of gold. Their 5 sockets were of brass. So it's just a lot of nitty-gritty detail. But just like I showed you in verse 37, if you want to do a deep study, sometimes you'll find out, man, maybe there's something for us New Testament Christians there too, because it was Jesus who is quoted over, I believe, in the book of Hebrews is where this comes from. He said, behold, it is written of me in the volume of the book. And I always say, if you read one of these books of the Old Testament and you don't see Jesus, go back and read it again with the Christian lenses on, because that's what it's doing. It's pointing out Christ to us, even way back hundreds of years before Christ. It's pointing toward him and his cross. See you next week. God bless you.